One image that I think really captures the title of chapter 26, The Affluent Society, is this photograph that appeared in Life magazine in the middle of the 1950s. It shows a family of four, the Chekalinskis. The father worked for DuPont, and it shows them pictured in front of a gigantic pile of food that represents what they would have purchased and consumed in a year on his salary. And I think this shows almost better than any other the prosperity and affluence of the American middle class in the 1950s. If you look at advertisements from 1950s or mainstream magazines like Time or Life, or if you look at TV sitcoms like I Love Lucy, you see people surrounded by mid-century modern furniture. There's a very distinctive clothing and design style of the 1950s, and people look happy and prosperous and well-fed. And there's this whole baby boom generation that's coming of age in what is the world's most prosperous country. So in many ways, the title of this chapter is very apt. Okay, but beyond the stereotypes, the 1950s is also a decade of tremendous economic and racial and cultural turbulence. It is hardly the happy days that we tend to remember from the 1950s. Let me point to two events at the end of the decade in 1960 to show you this. The first is that was an election year, a hotly contested election that would represent the passing of the torch from an older generation represented by Eisenhower to a younger generation represented by Eisenhower's vice president, Richard Nixon, and by John F. Kennedy, both of whom contended for the presidency in 1960. There's both a tremendous sense of possibility and also of deep threat in 1960. Also in November of 1960, CBS aired a documentary that depicted the lives of migrant agricultural workers, a rootless, landless, homeless underclass whose prospects for climbing out of poverty were grim. And this spanned the racial spectrum. It included Black, Latino, and poor white families from across the decade. So there's an undercurrent of rising poverty and growing structural inequity that defines the 1950s as much as our sunny stereotypes about prosperity and affluence. Here's an interview from that documentary titled Harvest of Shame.
We should like you to meet some of your fellow citizens who harvest the food for the best fed nation on earth.
David Lowe talks to Mrs. Doby, 34 years old, mother of 9 children.
Mrs. Doby, what things do you pick up north?
We pick strawberries and cherries.
Who works with you, this family here?
Everybody except the baby.
Who takes care of them in the field?
Well, they just kindly stay along with us or take care of themselves. The one that can't walk usually stays in the baby buggy.
What is an average dinner for the family?
Well, you mean what do we have in...
Yes.
I cook a pot of beans and fry some potatoes or some corn or something like that.
How many quarts of milk do you buy for the children?
Well, we don't have milk except maybe when we draw our paycheck, we have milk about once a week.
For all these children, you have
the
milk?
The baby has, she is on the bottle and she uses about 15 cans of milk a week. But the older children have milk about once a week.
Do they like to drink milk, Mrs. Doby?
Yes, they like milk.
The only reason I asked that question, I was quite shocked that they had milk only once a week.
Just thought they didn't like it. But they like milk, but there's so many. A gallon of milk will make them a glass around, and so we just can't afford it every day.
What do you want most for your children, Mrs. Doby?
Well, I'd like for them to have a career, whatever they want to be when they got older. Of course, the smaller ones, don't realize yet to know what they'd like to be. But the older girl, she'd like to go to school if she could. Of course, she'll probably be like the boy, have to quit as soon as she's old enough. She really likes to go to school, but she had to miss last week because she had to keep the baby for me to work.
Mrs. Doby, wouldn't you ever care to have a house of your own?
I'd like to have a house. If we plan to buy one, if we could ever get enough to pay down on one, we'd buy one.
Do you think this will ever happen?
Well, it don't seem like it.
As this chapter indicates, the 1950s is a decade when many of the structural inequalities that define our nation today became cemented in American economy, policy, custom, law, and culture. So watch for those and think about resonances and connections to our own time as you read this chapter. I've posted a notes guide to help you structure and organize your reading and study of this chapter. It's optional, it does not need to be turned in. And if you have questions or thoughts or reflections on this decade, reach out in the help forum, over email, or drop in during virtual office hours. Later in this unit, you'll be watching a full-length feature film either from or about the 1950s and using it as your source for the primary source analysis paper 3. I think watching that film will give you an additional dimension of understanding on a time period that speaks loudly to our own.